Why you can't heal by avoiding feeling. A Buddhist insight. You think you're over it. The heartbreak, the loss, the thing that once kept you up at night, it feels like ancient history now. You've moved on. Then one day, a song plays, or you smell something familiar, or someone says something that lands wrong, and just like that, you're back there. The same ache in your chest, the same weight you thought you'd finally put down. It's been months, maybe years, but the pain feels exactly the same. Why does it keep coming back? The answer lies in something we all do, something so automatic, so deeply woven into how we cope, that most of us don't even realize we're doing it. Think about what happens between the moments when the pain surfaces. During those weeks or months when you feel fine, when you think you've moved on, what's actually going on? We're avoiding. And most of us don't even see it. Because the most dangerous forms of avoidance don't look like avoidance at all. When you lose yourself in work after a difficult breakup, people call you dedicated. When you fill every evening with activities so you never have to be alone with your thoughts, people call you social. When you tell yourself, "I'm fine, others have it worse," people call you strong. But look closer. What's really happening? The first way we run is through action. We stay busy. We fill every moment. We become the person who always has something to do, somewhere to be, something to check off the list. And as long as we're moving, we don't have to feel. The moment we stop, everything catches up. So we make sure we never stop. The second is through numbing. This one is more obvious in some forms. Alcohol, drugs, but it has subtler faces too. Endless scrolling through social media. Binge-watching shows we don't even care about. Eating not because we're hungry, but because we need to feel something other than what we're feeling. These are all ways of turning down the volume on our inner life. The third is through the mind itself, through rationalization. It's not that bad. I should be over this by now. Other people deal with worse things. We use our thoughts to argue ourselves out of our feelings. We intellectualize. We explain away. And we mistake this for wisdom, when really it's just another form of running. What makes this so hard to see is that these strategies often look healthy. Staying busy looks like productivity. Rationalizing looks like perspective. Even numbing can look like taking care of yourself or giving yourself a break. The Buddha looked deeply into this pattern. He didn't turn away from it. He asked, what is really happening here? What are we actually doing when we try to escape our pain? He spoke of craving, that deep pull inside us that drives so much of what we do. And he named 3 types. The first is craving for pleasure, wanting pleasant experiences. The second is craving for existence, wanting to become something, to be someone. But the third is the one that catches us off guard. He called it craving for extermination, the craving for something to not exist. When you feel pain and you think, I just want this to go away, that is craving. When you feel grief and you think, I wish I didn't feel this, that is craving. The very desire to escape your suffering is itself a form of craving. And craving, in the Buddha's teaching, is the root of suffering. Do you see the trap? We suffer, so we want the suffering to end. But that wanting, that desperate wish for the pain to disappear, is itself another layer of suffering. We're not escaping, we're adding. This is what makes avoidance so insidious. It's not just ineffective. It's not just a temporary fix that wears off. It's actually part of the problem. It's one more thread in the knot we're trying to untie. And until we see this clearly, we will keep running in circles, wondering why we never arrive anywhere new. There's a teaching in the Buddhist texts from what's called the Salatha Sutta, the discourse on the arrow, that I return to again and again. It's simple, almost obvious once you hear it, but it contains something profound, something that, if you really understand it, can change how you relate to every difficult moment in your life. It begins with a question that might surprise you. The Buddha asks, what's the difference between an ordinary person and a wise person when it comes to pain? You might expect the answer to be that the wise person doesn't feel pain, that through meditation or spiritual practice, they've somehow transcended suffering, floated above it, become immune. But that's not what the Buddha says. Not at all. He says both the ordinary person and the wise person feel pain. Both experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neutral feelings. The body still hurts. The heart still aches. Loss still stings. The difference isn't in what they feel. The difference is in what happens next. The ordinary person, when they experience pain, adds to it. They sorrow. They lament. They beat their breast in confusion. They experience not one suffering, but two, the original pain, and then their reaction to it. The Buddha describes it like this. It's like a person who is struck with an arrow, only to be struck with a second arrow. Two arrows. The first arrow is the painful experience itself, the loss, the illness, the failure, the rejection, the thing that happened to you. This arrow cannot always be avoided. It's part of being alive. It's part of having a body, having a heart, caring about things and people. But the second arrow is our reaction to the first. It's the sorrow about the sorrow, the anger at the anger, the shame about the pain, the desperate wish for things to be different than they are. When we lose someone we love, the grief is the first arrow. But then comes the second. Why did this happen to me? I should have done more. I don't deserve to be happy anymore. If only I had. When illness strikes, the physical pain is the first arrow. But then, this isn't fair. Why me? I must have done something wrong. My life is ruined. When we fail at something important, the disappointment is the first arrow. But then, I'm worthless. I'll never succeed. Everyone can see what a failure I am. These reactions, the guilt, the self-blame, the victimhood, the endless mental replaying, these are not part of the original wound. These are arrows we shoot at ourselves. And here's what makes this so important. The first arrow has limits. It comes, it hurts, and according to the nature of things, it passes. Pain arises, and pain fades. That's the law of impermanence. But the second arrow has no limits. We can shoot it at ourselves over and over, for years, for decades, for an entire lifetime. Long after the original wound has healed, we can keep reopening it with our thoughts, our stories, our resistance. I've met people who carry grief not from what happened to them, but from the story they've told themselves about what happened. The event was the first arrow. The narrative became hundreds of second arrows, fired again and again, day after day. The wise person is different. They feel the first arrow fully. They don't pretend it doesn't hurt, but they don't reach for the second. They experience one pain, not two. One arrow, not an endless barrage. This is what healing actually looks like. It's not the absence of pain. The Buddha never promised that. Healing is learning not to add to our own suffering. It's feeling the first arrow fully, not running from it, not numbing it, and then, crucially, not reaching for the second. We can't always control the first arrow, but the second arrow is in our hands. So now we understand the trap, and we've seen how we create additional suffering through our reactions. But there's still a question that needs answering. Why doesn't avoidance work? Not just, it's not ideal, but why does it fundamentally fail every single time? The Buddha's answer goes deep into the nature of how our minds actually work, and it reveals something that might be uncomfortable to hear. The things we bury don't die. They wait. Let's start with a basic observation. Emotions don't disappear just because we want them to. You can wish with all your heart for the sadness to go away. You can tell yourself 1,000 times that you shouldn't feel this way. You can distract yourself until you're exhausted. But wishing isn't a method. Wanting isn't a practice. The Buddha taught that everything arises based on conditions. Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing disappears into nothing. Things arise when the right conditions come together, and they cease when those conditions change. This includes our emotions. In the 𝐂𝐴𝐴 Sutta, the Buddha described a chain. Sense experience leads to contact, contact leads to feeling, and feeling, if we're not aware, leads to craving. This chain doesn't break just because we want it to. It follows its own logic, its own conditions. So when we try to avoid an emotion, we're not actually addressing any of the conditions that gave rise to it. We're just looking away. The conditions are still there. The roots are still in the ground. And this brings us to something crucial. What the Buddha called the latent tendencies. Patterns buried deep in the mind that lie dormant, waiting for the right conditions to surface. Think of these as seeds. Seeds of greed, aversion, and confusion that sit beneath the soil of our awareness. When we experience something painful and we react with aversion, pushing it away, resisting it, running from it, we don't uproot that seed. We actually water it. We strengthen the pattern. The Buddha explained it this way. When we experience painful feeling and we react with resistance and confusion, the underlying tendency to aversion grows stronger beneath the surface. But when we don't react that way, when we experience the pain without the drama of resistance, that tendency doesn't get fed. It doesn't grow. This is why so many people think they've healed from something, only to be blindsided years later. They didn't heal. They suppressed. The seed stayed in the ground. And when the right conditions came along, a similar situation, a triggering memory, even just a moment of vulnerability, the old pain came rushing back, as fresh as ever. Avoidance doesn't uproot anything. It just lets the roots stay dormant, waiting. And there's another cost to this strategy, one that's perhaps even more painful. When we close the door to our difficult emotions, we close the door to all our emotions. The heart doesn't have separate switches for joy and sorrow. We can't selectively numb only the parts we don't like. When we build walls against our pain, those same walls block our happiness, our love, our aliveness. The Buddha described the ordinary person as someone who feels everything with attachment. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, even neutral feelings. The grasping and the pushing away become so habitual that we lose the ability to simply be with our experience. Everything becomes filtered through wanting or not wanting. The result is a kind of deadness, a flatness. We're protected from the lows, yes, but we're also cut off from the highs. We move through life slightly numb, slightly distant, unable to fully connect with ourselves or anyone else. This is the true cost of avoidance. Not just that it doesn't work, but that it slowly, quietly empties our lives of the very thing that makes them worth living. So if running doesn't work, if avoidance only adds to our suffering and leaves the roots untouched, what does work? The answer is not really a method. It's more like a shift in how we relate to what we're feeling. There's a way of approaching our emotions that looks like awareness, but is actually just avoidance wearing a different mask. It sounds like this: I'm going to observe my feelings so they'll go away. I'll be mindful of this pain so it will stop. This is still running. Still that craving for non-existence, just dressed up in spiritual language. We're not really with the emotion. We're just waiting for it to leave. The actual path is different. It's not about watching your emotions so they'll disappear. It's about returning to them so you can finally see what they actually are. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha used the word pajanati, to clearly know. When you feel something painful, know that you're feeling something painful. When you feel something pleasant, know that you're feeling something pleasant. Not to judge, not to fix, just to see clearly what's here. So what does this actually look like when the pain is real and present? It starts with something very simple: coming back to the body. When a difficult emotion arises, it doesn't just live in your thoughts. It lives somewhere in your body. Tightness in your chest, heaviness in your stomach, a knot in your throat. This is where the emotion actually is. Not in the story your mind keeps telling. The body is where the feeling lives. So you bring your attention there, to wherever the sensation is strongest, and you stay with it. Not with the thoughts about it, but with the raw physical experience of it. This matters because the body is always in the present moment. The mind can spiral into past and future, but the body is here, now. And when you're fully here, most things become more bearable than you expected. You don't have to stay for long or be brave. Just one breath. One full inhale and exhale while feeling what's there. And then, if you can, one more. This isn't about endurance. It's about discovering, breath by breath, that you can be with this. That it won't destroy you. That the wave, no matter how big it feels, will not pull you under. Because here's what you notice when you actually stay. The feeling is not solid. It moves. It shifts. It's not one permanent thing called my grief or my fear. It's a living, changing experience. You also notice something else. There's the feeling, and then there's the part of you that knows you're feeling it. They're not the same thing. The sadness is here, but you are the one who knows it's here. The fear is present, but you are the space in which it appears. This is what the Buddha pointed to when he described the wise person. If they feel a painful feeling, they feel it detached. Not detached as in cold or distant, but not lost in it either. Present with it, yet not owned by it. The emotion is like weather, sometimes storm, sometimes calm. But you are not the weather. You are what the weather moves through. And that awareness, that quiet knowing, is never damaged by what it knows. It doesn't drown. It doesn't break. This is how you stay without being destroyed. Not by becoming stronger than your emotions, but by discovering that you were always bigger than them. When the urge to run comes, and it will, you can notice that too. The urge to grab your phone, to pour a drink, to think about something, anything, other than this. These urges are not failures. They're just more waves. And like all waves, they rise, they peak, and they pass. You don't have to fight the urge, just don't follow it. There will be moments when it feels like too much. In those moments, you don't need to be strong. You just need to remember, I am not the wave. I am what the wave passes through. One breath, then another. This is how healing happens. Not in one dramatic breakthrough, but in small moments of staying when everything in you wants to run. No one can do this for you. Others can walk beside you. They can hold space. But the actual turning, the moment when something shifts from running to staying, that happens in you, and only you can make it happen. This isn't a burden. It means everything you need is already with you. The first arrow will come. That's life. But the second arrow is in your hands. This was the Buddha's insight. Not that we can escape pain, but that we can stop multiplying it. The wise person feels one arrow, not two. And that difference changes everything. Somewhere in the space between what happens to you and how you respond, there is freedom. Not a freedom you have to earn. A freedom you recognize when you finally stop running long enough to see it. Not by fighting, not by fleeing, but by staying, by seeing, by trusting that you are bigger than anything you will ever feel. That's the way through.